Good morning, everyone. Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Donovan Brown, Senior DevOps Program Manager at Microsoft, and today we're going to be talking about mobile DevOps, and I'm really excited to have my friend Thomas with me, who is one of the co-founders of HockeyApp. So Thomas, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so I'm going to ask the question I know everyone is dying to know. Why in the world is it called HockeyApp?
Always the same question over and over again. So when we founded HockeyApp in 2010, one of our co-founders, Andreas, he was starting an open source project. It was fully open source, both the client and the server. And he liked sports. He didn't like particularly hockey, but he was looking for a name. And so that's the one part of the story. And the other part is that the distribution on iOS is called ad hoc distribution.
Ad hoc, okay.
Ad hoc. So he took the hoc from ad hoc and added the key, so it became hockey.
I see.
Ad hoc is key for my open source project.
Gotcha.
And then we had Hockey Kit as kind of like the open source thing, and then we thought, what do we call the commercial product? And we thought about different options, but there was already adoption in the Hockey Kit thing, so we thought as a starting point it would be the easiest to just call it Hockey Kit and HockeyApp. So Hockey Kit is what you put into your app, the kit, and then HockeyApp is what you use on your browser or on your iPhone to install the apps.
Sure.
And then we went from there, and then we never bothered to look back.
Yeah, it's a good name because it's unique, and the URL must have been safe, right? So if you can get the domain, it's a good name, right?
Well, it's the domain, but also nowadays we have the domain. We have our main system is Rink, where you play hockey.
Right.
We have the little Zamboni icon. Our command line helper is puck, like what you play. So then you can use a hockey stick for your tweets, and you go with the theme.
Got it. Perfect.
And so it makes it easy to brand it and to kind of communicate the brand identity.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that even though you're now a partner or a part of Microsoft, we haven't changed the name, right? Because we're the worst at naming, if you weren't aware, right? So the fact that we left it HockeyApp,
although
I'm like, yes.
maybe
It's
the future will tell.
I hope we don't change it. it. So what we really want to talk about is mobile DevOps. Everyone knows me as the DevOps guy, right? And then we went out and we acquired you guys, and then we went out and acquired Xamarin, and we literally bought mobile DevOps. But when we say mobile DevOps, a lot of people are like, well, why do we classify mobile versus, why isn't it just DevOps? At the core, it still is, right? Because I define DevOps here for Microsoft as the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users, and that's true regardless if it's mobile or if it's web or whatever, right? So that's the crux.
So I would say I would see it a little bit differently.
Okay.
I would say we as Microsoft we invented mobile DevOps because sure we bought or Microsoft bought HockeyApp, and then we as Microsoft bought Xamarin, and Xamarin had Test Cloud and Insights. At the same time, an integral part of DevOps is team services, right? My repo, my work item tracking, my build pipeline. So Microsoft already had this.
Yep.
And so the acquisitions kind of bring in the mobile part, and then the basics were already there. And of course we have Visual Studio and we have .NET and stuff like that. So kind of like we brought the best parts of Microsoft together to define the mobile DevOps workflow.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never gone as far as to say we defined it, which is interesting. I would just call it mobile DevOps, but arguably I don't know of any other vendor who has what we have. Right.
So there's competitors obviously, but I wouldn't say they call it mobile DevOps. I think we were the first to call it actually mobile DevOps. And maybe there's some internet link where you can find and somebody else called it like this before, but I think we were part of the early adopters of that term to drive the mobile DevOps movement forward.
Okay, so you said there's other competitors out there, but would you say there's other competitors in mobile DevOps that have everything? There's no one who has.
Not really.
Exactly.
So let's say Google, right? Google has Firebase, and Firebase has analytics, and they have testing, and they have backend as a service, as we have with Azure, but they don't have build, for example, right? They don't offer a build pipeline, and they don't offer repositories and work item tracking anymore. So everybody has some components. Right now, we have the biggest assembly of workflow tools.
I just had a customer meeting today, and I went into that room, and I made a very blanket statement, and I said it with 100% confidence, knowing nothing about that customer. I said, if you are not using Visual Studio Team Services as your DevOps pipeline tool, you are using more than one vendor. And they looked at each other, and they all started nodding like he's right. I'm like, yes, I know I'm right, because we're the only one who has the IDE. the language, the source control, the build, and even the cloud in which you run it in. No other vendor has all of that. Yes, we have competitions in cloud. Yes, we have competitions in IDE, but those competitors don't also have the other part that I'm talking about.
Well, and the other cool thing is we are the only ones who support iOS, Android. Windows, macOS, Xamarin, Cordova, React Native, right? You name it, we support it.
Exactly.
Like, we're the only one who's really independent. Like, sure, we also sell Windows and Office and stuff like that. But we're the only one on the developer side who's really independent of the tool chain.
Absolutely.
We offer everything.
Yes, because I had to mention that as well, because I always talk about any language, any platform. So I was fortunate enough to be at Ignite. Well, you were there.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. It was awesome, right? So Scott invited me to speak in the keynote, and I was so excited. And I had to say at least half a dozen times, any language, any platform. And a lot of people think I'm bluffing when I say that. And I challenged 23,000 people at Ignite to bring me any language on any platform, and I will prove to you that I can deploy that. And I did Java right there on stage for them, right? Because our tool set now, like you said, not only does it have everything, we understand that you can't just be Windows and .NET. Because our customers aren't just Windows and .NET. Everyone is heterogeneous now. Everyone's trying to target everything with different languages. And now our build system and our tooling is just basically, I don't have my laptop in here, my other laptops, but I literally have a Mac, I have a Linux laptop.
Well, I have my Mac here, right? You have your PC here. Here's my iPhone.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, and that's my real work machine. I do all my work on this machine.
And
right?
that's a Microsoft no one would have recognized a decade, or even dreamed would be the Microsoft we have today, which is amazing. Because I have a Linux machine in my backpack too. It's nuts.
And then it runs, the team services build agent here, which is Node, running Node on my Mac to build a Visual Studio project, which is like.
Yeah, see the Node one, it's interesting, right? Because you mentioned Node. Node is the old build agent. We have a new one written in .NET Core, right? So it's literally
but it's still running on my Mac, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because .NET Core got open source, runs everywhere. So what we did is we went back and redesigned our agent so that we don't have to write it in Node and in .NET. We now write it in .NET Core, and it's the exact same one, runs on all three platforms. It's freaking awesome. So obviously you guys know me from, I work in the VSTS team. I'm a huge fan of our build system. So that's why I kind of geek out over that stuff. But let's talk again, let's focus again on mobile. And whenever I talk about mobile DevOps, and the reason that I classified it differently is because I think personally it's one of the hardest ways to implement because of the devices, because of the unique way of testing, because it requires both Mac and Windows or Mac and Linux to build everything. So I tell everybody, the fact that we can do mobile DevOps, we can do any DevOps you want, because everything else is like easy compared to what's going on in mobile. And talk to me a little bit more about what role HockeyApp plays in that DevOps pipeline.
Yeah, so let's start. I mean, the obvious start in the DevOps pipeline is always that I start on my Mac or my PC, I code something, right? And I push my code into my repository. Absolutely. And it can be any repository, right? A Git repository on GitHub, a Git repository on Bitbucket, or of course on team services.
Even Subversion, we support Subversion too.
So I push my code into the repository, and now what I want to happen is that it automatically creates a build for me. So my build pipeline creates a build for me from my source. So we are like kind of transitioning from the code phase into the build phase, right? And that can be VSTS or Jenkins, whatever you prefer, you use it. The important part is it's automatic, right? I push code and automatically get a build outfit.
Yes.
And now I want to test that build. So we want to now, so I've moved from code into build, now we want to move from build into test and deliver, right? And test and deliver are kind of two parts of the same story. One is HockeyApp, where I can literally take my iPhone here, open HockeyApp and install my app right away from my code that I just committed. So that's the one role HockeyApp plays: continuous delivery, continuous distribution to all Microsoft employees, to your external testers, literally everyone you want to test with. And then the other side that actually also I own now is Test Cloud. Okay. So we have thousands of devices in a data center connected to a server farm, and I can run the same app that I run on my own phone and manually test automatically on Test Cloud.
Right, exactly. So I can record those tests both on my Mac or now I think there's an extension inside Visual Studio that allows me to automatically generate those without writing any code.
Yeah.
I can then
test
take
recorder,
those. Test recorder. I can then take those and then as part of my CI build or even my release pipeline, actually execute those in the Test Cloud for me, right?
So and then we have finished the testing. All tests are green, right? We got feedback from our testers on the phone, but we also want to collect data from the testers or from the employees or from the end users, because really HockeyApp or our pipeline covers the whole life cycle. It's not only alpha or beta apps, it's all apps in all life cycles. So we kind of start to close the loop by monitoring stuff. So we see crash reports, we see custom events, sessions, users, all data you can really imagine. And then now I have all that data. What do I do with it? I want to put them onto my backlog. So we have integration between HockeyApp and team services. So whenever a crash appears more often, or I have feedback from my users that I want to work on, I get a ticket, a work item in VSTS, and then I'm back on my Mac here running the next iteration.
Exactly, because when people talk about DevOps, sometimes they focus just on the automation part. Yeah. And I say you really need to broaden your view of DevOps. DevOps began with the idea, and it doesn't end, in my opinion, until I am monitoring in production, because that monitoring is the only way I know if I delivered value. Otherwise, I just copied files to a person's machine, and if they're not using that feature, I didn't deliver value. I just changed the code, right? So it takes that custom telemetry you're talking about, and when we start talking about custom telemetry, HockeyApp has some, but we acquired Xamarin, who had some. So what is the new vision of where do I go to get my telemetry, and what happened to Xamarin Insights? So what's going on there?
So Xamarin had two lifecycle products. One is Test Cloud and one is Insights, Xamarin Insights. So for Xamarin Insights, we have already announced at Build that we are merging it with HockeyApp. But in reality, all those teams have now merged and work together on the next version of Mobile DevOps, which we will announce in November at the Connect event.
Okay, great.
So we are now working together. We're looking at HockeyApp, we're looking at Test Cloud, we're looking at Insights, and we're thinking, what could be the next big thing for those products brought together. And
all right, great. So in November, so at Connect, I can't wait. I've already been in some of those meetings, and we're going to show you some really cool stuff at Connect. So you definitely want to make sure you tune in for that one. Very, very cool. One of the other things that I know is a huge challenge as I talk about the fact that the device proliferation, right? So can you talk about how rapidly do we get new devices into the Test Cloud?
So into the Test Cloud, it's we try to get them into Tier 1 on day one. So Tier 1 are the most supported devices with them, up-to-date, multiple devices available. It's often a challenge, specifically with the iPhone, to get them on day one. So we try our best. We currently have the iPhone 7 available, so we got it like 2 days later.
Okay.
But in general, our policy is to get them on day one. And similar for all the tools, be it Xamarin, be it HockeyApp, we try to be, release day available for the customers. So like Xamarin supported iOS 10 on release day, HockeyApp did, Test Cloud did.
All right, got it.
Everything, because we know our developers need to submit new updates to Apple. They want to be up to date for their customers to deliver the value.
Sure.
So we try to do our best. It's often a challenge because we don't get any special stuff from Apple, right? Like we see the news at WWDC, we speak to the Apple engineers there, and then from there we have to take it on our own and basically work here at Microsoft to get things done.
Okay.
And we testing the iOS 10 betas ever since they came out on my phone, so just I can validate that on HockeyApp everything works for our customers.
Okay,
so we see the bugs really early in the phase. Same for OS 10 or macOS Sierra on my Mac. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the final deployment, because that's another thing that's kind of tough on a mobile application. When I'm doing a web app and I'm deploying it into Azure or into a server, it's simple to get it into production because I just copy my files into the environment and then poof, it's ready for everyone. But when you're dealing with an application that has to be distributed through a store, how do we address that in a mobile DevOps pipeline where I need to get into the Windows Store, I need to get into Google Play, I need to get into the App Store? Is that something we can fully automate, or is that something where we can only take you so far, now we have to stop, and then you have to go do some manual stuff?
It's a trick question. You just want me to promote team services more. So yeah, we can do all that. So I already talked about how my code can be in team services, how my build agent is in team services, my unit tests are in team services, and then from there we branch off into Test Cloud and HockeyApp. But team services is another tool called release management, which is kind of my umbrella above everything, where I can manage my whole release process. And I actually saw a tweet from you the other day that we have now the manual intervention too.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, the way it works is that instead of directly uploading my build from the build pipeline into HockeyApp or Test Cloud, I used release management for this. So I set up my build pipeline, and then I get my artifact, my package, my symbols. I load it into the artifact store in team services, and then from there I take the artifacts and route them into the different channels I have. So an obvious channel would be Test Cloud, HockeyApp, but then we also have extensions for Google Play and for the App Store. So you can literally completely automate the submission process into the Google Play Store or into the App Store. You can, say I want a staged rollout to 10% of my users. I can use Test Flight as kind of like an additional external testing in addition to HockeyApp. Basically, once you go really production ready, like your RC, You would basically roll it out to 2,000 test flight users, and then you can also promote the test flight build into the production build, all completely automated from release management. And then the other cool stuff is that I can set approvers. So I can say, I want to pre-approve or post-approve every step. So whenever I'm done with Test Cloud and I'm done with HockeyApp, I want my manager to say, okay, that build is good. Thomas, you did a good job. Now I want to VSTS to submit it to the App Store. Okay. But he's only approving it, right? He's not literally going into the Apple tool and uploading something manually. He's just approving it, and everything else is still, following the process. I get my audit logs, I get my validation, and best of all, I can literally see, so this App Store build came from this build pipeline. This were the test results. This were all the commits that went into this. Right? This is like the full power of mobile DevOps in the delivery direction and in the reverse validation direction.
I agree. I think that's one thing that I tell people a lot as well, is that when you build a tool chain yourself versus getting it from us, getting that level of traceability and fidelity is really difficult, right? But what we can literally do is look at a deployment, track it back to the build, track it back to the code change, and even track it back to the work item that initiated that particular code change, right? So that's a traceability that's really hard to do when you build the tool chain yourself.
And then it's all extensible, right? So I can, I have the service hooks, so I can post into Slack to see, that
REST
the approval
APIs
has been done. I can use the REST APIs, but I can also use extensions, so I can write my own release or build tasks that hook into that process and work together with my business, whatever I have in my business, right? For example, sending up a blog post, releasing the blog post on my GitHub page or something.
That can be automated completely.
Completely automated in release management.
If you can dream it, you can do it. Because writing a task is so simple. It's either Node or PowerShell. I mean, anyone can go do that. And if you already have something that can be exploited through a command line, you don't have to write anything, right? You can just tell us when to run the command line with the parameters. And
that's the cool thing now about the manual intervention, that we finally have that, because now I can also combine that with my Azure deploy, right? Or my backend deploy.
That's a very good point.
That's what we always discussed about last year, right?
Exactly.
It's like you do your Azure deploy, you wait with the App Store deploy through a manual intervention step. So somebody has to go in and see if the Azure deploy really went through, and then they approve, and then the App Store deploy went through.
And what I was looking at as well is that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of times you start focusing on mobile DevOps, and all we focus on is moving it to the phone, but very few apps out there exist only on the phone. They are supported by a backend, databases and web servers and all this other infrastructure that needs to be deployed in concert with the front end, right? Because the front end is useless without the proper backend. I know some people were trying rolling up the backend that still supported the current front end, and then finally you would roll out the front end. And I mean, that works, but then it gets complicated very quickly. And with things like release management and the fact that mobile DevOps it's a superset of every other DevOps we already do, right? So that we're going to be able to deploy your database and your web services and run tests on those as well. When you do mobile DevOps, you're not forced to just focus on the mobile part. You're able to focus on the entire application as
and it's not only the backend of the app, it's my whole business, right? So let's say I have the new major version of my app, maybe I have a new homepage that I want to launch at exactly the same time as the app itself, right? I may have whatever other processes are connected, even like sending out a newsletter or something, right? Where I would hook into MailChimp or SendGrid to send out my newsletter, right? I want everything in mobile DevOps or in DevOps should be automated, or at least has a defined flow where I interact only at certain steps, but everything else is like kind of scripted. And developers are like, I'm very lazy person. I don't want to do the same thing twice, right? Because it's boring the second time. And so I want to spend time to set it up, and then I have it running, and I might tune things here and there, right? As we do with our demos and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Last demo was not so good. I want to tune it a little bit, but I don't want to do the same thing over and over again.
I tell everybody, your best developers are the laziest guys you know, because we're going to make a computer do what we don't want to do. And automation is key, because every time you send a human being to do a machine's job, the human being has a risk of messing it up, where a machine is going to do it the exact same way every time. I'm a huge fan of automation, and I automate everything. I'm going to kind of plug my talk at New Zealand. You and I are doing one together, and I'm doing another one the next day where I'm literally going to automate the automation. I'll let you figure out what that means when we get there, right? So that's a little teaser about what I'm going to do in New Zealand, but I'm going to automate the automation, and it's going to be incredible, some of the stuff we can do. So,
but one thing we haven't mentioned so far, so we have talked about, team services, HockeyApp, distribution, backend, but there's another aspect, which is security. So here at Microsoft, we have Intune, Microsoft Intune, which offers two features: mobile device management, which is basically I can enroll my device, I get all the Wi-Fi profiles from Microsoft, but I also get like a PIN code requirement and stuff like that. But we also have, Intune has also a feature called MAM, Mobile Application Management.
Okay.
And what I basically do is I take my build, I wrap it with the Intune SDK. It's literally one command line thing that you enter on the command line, one command line command that you enter on the command line. And it adds some Azure Active Directory to my app. It adds policy to my app. So even if my app in the App Store, if I have a line of business app or like a Office 365 connected app, I can ask my users to sign in with their Microsoft account, and then I can ask them to get a PIN code. I can prevent them from copying personal data and business data into the same thing. So for example, if you do that with your app, then you can prevent your users from copying your high business data into Facebook.
Okay,
And
so you
and
mentioned
that's
Intune, though. So Intune's not just for Microsoft. This is another product that we sell to enterprises that
Yes.
they can use, right? So
That's the two components. One is we sell it to enterprises, and they can use it to restrict their employee devices.
Okay.
That's kind of like the known thing. It's called MDM. It's really device management, making sure that the employees can bring their own devices, but they still fall under some IT policies to make sure I have a secure password, I have
Gotcha.
encryption stuff. That's the MDM part. But the MAM part plays very good together with Mobile DevOps, and we actually will talk about this in our
Yep.
New Zealand session, because I take any app and I add security to it without requiring any device enrollment. It's literally just the app. The app can then show a PIN code. So my data is secured by the PIN code. I can even use Touch ID on my iPhone, so I can use just my finger.
Perfect.
And it restricts copy and paste. I can make sure encryption is required and stuff like that. So basically, we add a security layer to the DevOps flow to the app itself.
very nice, very nice. Yeah. We were talking about that because I think you just did a session at Ignite North America,
Yes,
very similar
yes.
to that one as well, right? So people can go and watch that as well. Now, before we go too far off of being able to push into like the Apple Store and to Google Play, all we're doing is automating the submission. It doesn't instantly show up, right? It still has to go through the normal review process and all that kind of stuff, right?
On Apple, yeah. On Google, there is no review. So
Alright,
on
so-
Google, it goes live after a couple of hours, depending on how their processing goes.
Okay.
So you push it into the Google Store, you can literally say, make it live, and then you wait like an hour or two, and then it becomes live on the phone.
All right,
On
perfect.
Apple, there's always the review, so you have to wait for the review to happen.
Understood.
For production, not for test flight, right? So for test flight, you can avoid the review if it's internal only.
All right, so do I need test flight if I'm using HockeyApp? Can I get that to all my testers without that?
So it depends on what your scenario is. So let's
Okay.
say here at Microsoft, we don't really need it for a lot of scenarios because we have so many employees in the company, and all the company employees are testing all the Microsoft apps, right? So I can go on to HockeyApp, I can test the latest version of Word, of Excel, of Skype, all the Microsoft iOS apps. And so all the employees are doing this, so we get a lot of data from the employees without going to test flight. And then we only go to test flight for very late stage testing. Like
Okay.
3 days before the launch, we basically give it out to a few outside testers to test the app.
All right.
Now, if you're a small company, you don't have that option, and then because you only have 5 people in the company, so you'd rather want a bigger test audience. And now the problem on iOS is that on HockeyApp or any third-party platform like HockeyApp, you're restricted to 100 device IDs for external testers. So that's an Apple
Interesting.
restriction in the license terms, saying you can only deliver your app to 100 iPhones, 100 iPads, 100 watches, 100 TVs.
Okay.
So you had 500 devices if they're really all separate, but usually, I have a watch and a phone, so it's not really 500.
Sure.
And then, and I still can distribute to as many employees as I have because that's unlimited, but for external testers, I have to go through the ad hoc provisioning, which has that device limit on the Apple side.
Interesting.
Okay. So then test flight gives me 2,000 testers. So I can expand my test base from 100 to 2,000, which is kind of like the next step, right? I still want my builds that go out on every commit. I want them, to go through HockeyApp, so everybody in that small test group is always up to date on hourly builds or daily builds. And then I submit to Apple maybe once a week or so, because as soon as I've changed major parts of the app, I have to review. I have to go through the review again.
That's
So
right,
Apple
that's right.
says, no review if you just do a minor change, but you
Okay.
always have to go through review if you do a major change to the app or app
Interesting.
description or stuff like that.
Oh, okay, interesting. So you kind of touched on this earlier, and I just want to go back and reiterate this. Although we own Xamarin, you are not required to use Xamarin
No,
to
not at
enable
all.
all this power.
No.
So HockeyApp works no matter if I write it natively or directly in Xcode, or if I do an Android Studio.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if I use Cordova or anything.
Yeah.
HockeyApp's going to allow me to distribute that, because all it cares about is the final output of your build, right? Which is always going to be an IPK or IPA or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it cares about the output of the build,
APK.
and we also care about the SDK, but we literally have an SDK for iOS, we have one for Android, we have one for Xamarin, we have one for Cordova. So we are, and the SDKs are open source, so you can basically just take our iOS SDK, adapt it to whatever workflow you have. We have an SDK for Unity, but I mean, there might be some game engine out there where we don't have an SDK, but you can take our open source iOS or Android SDK and adapt it to your platform.
Perfect. So that's for a HockeyApp, but the same is true for Xamarin Test Cloud, right?
Yeah, so Test Cloud doesn't care at all. It's really only about the app binary, and so we support everything. It's called Xamarin Test Cloud because Xamarin was the company, not Xamarin the technology.
Exactly. Good. I just want to make sure that was clear for everyone too, because sometimes, again, with the way we name things, sometimes people immediately think, oh, hey, this is great if I use Xamarin, but I've already started down the road of Xcode. Can I still utilize HockeyApp and XTC? You can, right? And you can definitely utilize everything that we do inside of Visual Studio Team Services, because we support native builds of Xcode or whatever it is that you need as well.
So you can, with Test Recorder, which is the app that runs on my Mac or as part of Visual Studio, I can literally take my IPA file, I install it on my phone, I connect the phone via USB to my Mac, and then I just interact with my app on the phone, and Test Recorder will record those tests on my Mac and then upload them to Test Cloud together with the API. I don't need an SDK, I don't need anything.
Interesting.
I just take my debug build, I enable accessibility on my phone, and then we can capture the touches and the gestures and stuff like that, and create a test case.
So what version of Visual Studio do I need to get access to that recorder? Is there anything special I have to do, anything special I have to install, or is it just automatically there for me?
I think it's Visual Studio 2015, but don't ask me about this.
Which update? Yeah, okay.
I think it comes as part of the Xamarin package. Maybe it's part of some enterprise SKU, I don't know. But so the Test Recorder app on Mac is definitely a preview, so I can.
I've seen that one.
As a standalone app, I can just download it on my Mac and use it without any license requirement.
So I'm going to give you some homework then. You'll do me a favor. Let's find out what they need, and we'll put it in the comments of the show on how do you get to that recorder, because I think I might want to demo some of that, so I need to know that myself. So I need to make sure, because I've seen it. I've seen it before.
You got me there.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to get you either. I'm actually curious, because I don't know the answer too, so I wasn't trying to catch you, but I'm sure I'm not the only person.
But you don't need
how to
the
get
test
that.
recorder, right? So you only need the test recorder if you want to record tests on your phone.
Right. You could actually handcraft the test too,
You can just write them in Xamarin UI test, which is our C# test language.
Okay.
You can use Calabash, which is a Ruby-based domain-specific language, the Ruby DSL. Okay. So you can write Ruby tests and then run them on both iOS and Android.
Perfect.
And we just announced Appium support, which
so
is like the
Selenium.
Java.
Yeah.
This is Selenium Java driver. So that's coming. If you want access, just ping us, and then we can give you access to the preview of that.
Okay, so where should they ping you? Because I'm active on Twitter. I know I pull you into conversations.
You can just ping me on Twitter, or just ping us on HockeyApp, and because it's the same team now, right? I mean, just support at hockeyapp.net or at HockeyApp on Twitter. At
HockeyApp on Twitter, right? We'll make sure that's in the packages as well. So I'm trying to think of other things that when I go and talk to customers about mobile DevOps, or what are some of the challenges that you see, or are there still major challenges in the mobile DevOps space that we're still trying to find solutions for? Or do you think we basically have everything covered and we're just trying to polish it now?
I would say we have most of it covered. For example, Test Cloud has no Windows support today, so we want to add Windows support because we are Microsoft.
If you need Windows support today, though, we actually have partners like Perfecto Mobile. I'm a huge fan of Perfecto Mobile. Love my Perfecto Mobile guys. The reason why I thought it was so cool is because I got to go to one of their data centers and see racks and racks and racks of phones, all kinds of phones, and they had services and service books and all that kind of stuff. So it was neat. So if they need it immediately, they can use partners like Perfecto Mobile and get to Windows, and just another option, right?
So that's you can compose all our tools together with other tools.
Absolutely.
It's like the Unix philosophy, right? If I don't have a command line tool ready, I just use another one and pipe it together. Right. And so you can use Jenkins, you can use Perfecto Mobile, GitHub, and our release management. For example, right?
Exactly.
You can even do your deploy to Amazon if you want to, right?
I say the same thing. I say that.
You ask how we can get better, right? So we can get better by improving our own tools, so adding Windows to Test Cloud. And then I think where we can get really better is to make the first-time experience much better. Okay. Right now we have all those tools, right, and they have all their own history. Visual Studio Online used to be
VSTS
Team Service used to be Visual Studio Online, used to be TFS, used to be Brian's baby.
Right.
Before he got acquired,
exactly,
a long time ago.
Exactly.
So and then HockeyApp has history, Xamarin Test Cloud has history. So we have all those tools, and we keep demoing them and keep explaining them. But we can do a better job of people at discovering them themselves, and then setting it up in like 5 magic seconds. Like this is like kind of I think the challenge for all of mobile DevOps, no matter where you look. Even if you just go to a simple Jenkins setup, it's coming
it's
from
not
a very
simple.
It's but it's simple in terms
no,
of
I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
exactly.
simple
exactly.
results, complicated setup.
Exactly.
And everybody is pushing into the direction of making that much easier.
Yeah.
Because we have now kind of laid the foundation, but we haven't really matured in the mobile.
I call it
DevOps
reducing the friction.
Yeah.
There's a lot of friction to get it done. So, and I almost feel bad sometimes when I build this amazing demo, and I know it took me a long time to do. Right. So when I get on stage, sometimes I feel like, oh man, am I an imposter? Right. Yeah, it works, but do I honestly think that you could sit down and make this happen? It's like sometimes like, okay, I got to go do better, right? Which is kind of interesting because if I reach to the point where I'm thinking, okay, it took me an hour to figure this out, I'm failing, right? Our team needs to go make this easier because if I can't even figure it out, come on, man. Our customers are really going to struggle. And so yeah, I hear what you're saying. So right now, we believe we have all of the I's dotted and all the T's crossed, but now what we're going to do is go back in and reduce that friction and polish that workflow.
And it's awesome once you have it set up.
It is.
Usually
it just
works,
runs and runs
all
and
the
runs.
time,
Exactly.
But it's not like super obvious how to set it up.
I agree.
And then also I think we have all those tools and they are integrated with each other, so I can upload from Team Services into HockeyApp and into Test Cloud, and I can get my Test Cloud report back into Team Services. But that's kind of like for me, we took the baby steps, and so now we have the child integration, but really want to mature. We want to become adults, and it's really a system working together to create something awesome.
Awesome.
Right?
And I think the more that we do it, we're going to start to see patterns like we do everywhere, right? To where we're going to be able to give you a template that says, if this is the way you do development, we're going to set up the build and the release for you, right? We know what you need. Versus now, a lot of us are kind of like figuring this out. Like, oh, that doesn't feel quite right. You and I remember, where does HockeyApp show up? Is it in the build or is it in the release? We had that talk about a year ago. And now we realize with some of the improvements that we made that we kind of want to move it a little bit further down the pipeline where we control how many testers get it and then can tell HockeyApp, show a little bit more testers this particular thing. Okay, HockeyApp, it's good, put it in the store for us. Where when our first iteration of this, HockeyApp was in the build. Right, so I think it's a learning process for everyone involved, and as we learn more, we're able to reduce that friction and then give you a better experience.
Yeah.
But I think you're right too. Like I said, when we went and acquired Xamarin, it was like the last piece to the puzzle, right, for mobile DevOps to be possible.
And or to give you another example, right, we have crash reports on HockeyApp, and they're fully symbolicated, so I can see method names and class names, and I see my file and line number, and we have a backlink from the version to the commit. But we could actually do a backlink from my crash log right into the code that lives on VSTS, right?
Yep.
And this is all possible. We just have to get there,
right.
And that's not. We are not there yet, and I hope we get there soon.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned that to a lot of people too because Xamarin has always had a plugin inside of Visual Studio. Now that they're part of us, that integration just gets that much tighter, that much better, to where it's no longer an extension, it's just a part of Visual Studio. And the same thing with HockeyApp. I remember when we first met and we were talking about how do we get the linkage between Team Services and HockeyApp to be tighter now, right? And I think what we're going to see over time is just they almost meld into just the solution, right? Not this, and this, but it's just the solution.
But we want to get tighter, but we don't want to create a lock-in. Right?
Absolutely.
So that's
absolutely.
a challenge, right? So you kind of have to fight yourself a little bit because you want to have a tighter integration, but at the same time you want every tool to be attractive on its own. If I just want work item tracking in TFS, VSTS, whatever, I just want to use that one and not be forced into also using a repository and HockeyApp.
I get that challenge all the time because I always lead with Team Services is everything that you need to turn an idea into a working piece of software, and some people recoil from that statement thinking, oh, that's vendor lock-in, and then I have to go back and explain, no guys, if you want to only use our build, fine. If you only want to use our source control, fine. If you only want to use HockeyApp, fine, right? So I agree with you, and the way that I see us doing that is that we basically have to make sure that we integrate with each other the same way we would allow externals to integrate with us, REST APIs, service hooks, and all the other standard ways to communicate. But again, we obviously should be able to do it better than anyone else, right? Because we are the same person, we are the same system. But I completely agree, and I have to go back all the time and convince people that if you're already invested in Jenkins, you do not have to abandon Jenkins, but you can still take advantage of everything else you and I just talked about today. And a lot of people have a hard time believing that because we're Microsoft, and historically it's all or nothing with Microsoft. But it's a new Microsoft, which we keep trying to tell people is that it's not the same Microsoft. There's a Mac and no one's upset about it, right? I have a Linux machine for the first time in my life after I joined Microsoft, and no one's upset about it, right? I had to learn Linux when I joined Microsoft. How weird is that, right? I mean, every time I say that, it just doesn't sound right that I joined Microsoft, then I installed Linux for the first time. But that's the Microsoft that we live in, and I hope that we can finally convince people that when I say any language, any platform, I'm not bluffing, right? That is our goal, is to enable any language on any platform, and that includes iOS, Android, Windows, Linux, Mac, wearables, your TV, your Xbox, your Raspberry Pi, your Arduino, we don't care, right? Wherever you want to write your code and wherever you want to deploy your code, I go to work every day trying to make that true.
And we are evangelizing mobile DevOps and continuous everything. And of course, we want to do the same thing here at Microsoft, right? Absolutely. So we want to deliver value to our customers, we want to engage with them, we want to learn from them and deliver even more value.
Absolutely.
So it's not we have the November moment, right? And we ship something, but then we need to ship more and more and more, and we want to continuously improve. And I think that's as important for our customers as it is for us.
Absolutely, and we're on that journey ourselves, which is a story that I tell quite a bit, is that TFS used to take 3 years to write. Now we release it every 3 months. We took it to the cloud and we release it every 3 weeks. And we're not happy with 3 weeks, right? We want to release it every week, every day, every hour. And we're constantly on this journey of how do we continue to improve. And what I love about it is that we're using our own tools to do that. So Visual Studio Team Services is versioned, built, and deployed using Visual Studio Team Services, which is freaking awesome. So that brings up another question. How many of our mobile apps that we, and applications that we write here at Microsoft, are using our mobile DevOps pipeline? So is HockeyApp deployed and built in with all the same stuff that we've just been describing?
So I would answer all of them, except there are so many apps at Microsoft that I don't know all of them.
Absolutely.
But there's like Office is using it, Skype is using it, Yammer is using it, Power BI is using it. All the major apps have some integration with HockeyApp. Some are using other tools in addition to this, which is our internal teams are no different to our customers. Whatever you prefer for your solution, you use it. But especially for the dog fooding here at Microsoft, you see literally every app on the HockeyApp dashboard to test it and try it out.
That's awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I have had a blast, man. I really do appreciate you coming on the show. I've been actually dying to have you on the show for a while. We have been scheduling for what? Since I lived here, right? So 6 months we've been trying. You think it's been that long? Yeah, it's been a long time.
Last year at Connect, I think, was the first time we
mentioned about having this interview, and I think it was incredible because you're just a wealth of information. So thank you so much for joining us.
So much fun. Thank you very much.
No, anytime, man. And we are going to kill it when we go to New Zealand. That's going to be awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
See you guys.
See you.